Thank you for still staying with us here on the AM show. On AM Talk today, something that is usually common, but we probably take it for granted. Some of us may not even know at all. Question: did you know that it is an offense not to report an accident? Yes, it is, and I'll show you exactly what the law says. So it is an offense, and the law says stop, report accident. But details of it says in a case where an accident occurs causing personal injury to another person, or damage is caused to another vehicle or to an animal other than a bird. And there's more to this. It's just that for the purposes of this discussion, we've taken a lot of things out, limiting it to what is relevant to this conversation. This is Section 124 of the Road Traffic Act 2004, Act 683. It continues to say a driver shall, in every case, report the accident to a police station as soon as reasonably practicable within 24 or 48 hours of the occurrence of the accident, depending on where the accident occurred. So depending on where the accident occurs, you're expected to report within 28 or 48 hours. So a person who fails to comply commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding 250 penalty units or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 12 months or to both. So imagine a person who, was a passenger sitting on a motorbike and the motorbike knocks someone down. You would think that it's only the driver who has the responsibility to report that accident, but no. The other person also does have a responsibility. Well, a court sentenced an 18-year-old after he failed to pay a fine of 1,200 Ghana cedis after a motorbike his brother was riding knocked down a pedestrian. He was seated behind his brother when the incident happened. Here's Maxwell Agbagba with the full story and an unexpected intervention by the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative leading to the release of the 18-year-old and another who stole from her sister.
Outside the giant walls of the CHRI prisons, I've met 18-year-old Isaac Edu in his orange prison uniform. What started as a normal day for him sometime last year did not end well. A motorbike his brother was riding with him behind was involved in an accident. The two failed to report the accident to police. He was fined 1,200 cedis, but he could not pay, so he was imprisoned for 9 months. Isaac says he struggled to come to terms with his new life behind the walls of the prison. I was behind my brother on the motorbike. He knocked down a pedestrian with a bike. We were 3 instead of 2. In court, I was asked whether I knew how to ride. I said yes. Although I was not the one riding, I was fined. I couldn't pay, so I was brought to the CHRI prisons where I served 5 out of the 9 months, he said with tears in his eyes. His colleague inmate at the CHRI prison, Richard Akono, was imprisoned after he was unable to pay a fine of 600 Ghana cedis. He had transferred an amount of 830 cedis from his sister's phone to his mobile money account. His sister reported this to the police and he was subsequently dragged to court.
The reason why I did that was I was needed some amount of money, and I asked my sister that she should give me some amount of money. Then she said she don't have. So I took her phone and makes a research that he was having some amount of money. Then I transfer that money to my phone. So afterwards, I was in the house making a washing. I got a call from somebody. I wasn't not that kind of a person. So I showed the person my location. So it's about just 5 or 10 minutes. The person arrived to my house. He said, I have been arrested. So they took me to police station and write my statement. Then I confirmed that I did it, but it was a mistake, so they should forgive me. My sister, she will feel pains because I didn't tell her that I'm about to transfer her money. So it's she was putting me under treatment. It's somehow hard, but it's normal. So I advise the youth on the outside that they should work hard. They should not steal anybody. They should not fight.
Commander of the Koforidua prisons, DPP Kweku Abebiu Ali, says the congestion in Ghana's prisons can be controlled through non-custodial sentences.
The way of decongesting the prison is like what you have just done, what the CHRI have just done. And it is a noble decision that they have taken. At least for nothing else, the thought of it, that there are some people who are in the prison, maybe due to no fault of theirs, and they are there. So for coming to their aid to release them, it helps to decongest the prison. And it's a noble idea, and I want everyone to do it. So happy. In fact, I don't think that number was what they wanted. In fact, they wanted more, which would have gone a long way to help us decongest the prison. But unfortunately, that is the number that we had for them. And I want to believe that this is not going to be the end of the exercise. As time goes on, I want to believe that they once in a while come to our aid to assist, to see whether there are some people who still have those kind of issues to assist them. So I want to thank them so very much for all that they have done for this our younger brothers who have seen the light of day today.
The Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative is concerned about how culprits of minor offences are thrown into Ghana's already choked prisons. Hence, its agenda to push for decriminalization of petty offences, which it believes will result in more non-custodial sentences. The CHRI paid the fines of the two men and others, and now they can go back to pursue their dreams. Here's the Africa Office Director of the CHRI, Mena Mensah.
1, the fact that our prisons are congested. Number 2, the fact that we are in COVID. And then 3, the fact that for some of the people who are here, they ought not to be here. We are not saying they ought not to be here because they haven't committed any offense. All we are saying is that for the offenses that they've committed, they don't have to be here. Why are we saying that? The court system itself said a fine or custodial sentencing, meaning that the courts that asked for found them guilty are of the view that their offenses are such that they don't have to be incarcerated. Unfortunately, quite a number of these people cannot pay the fines that they have been the fines that were awarded, so they were not able to pay the fines, and for that reason they were incarcerated. In these days of COVID, the CHRI has been doing a project for about 4 or 5 years now, advocating for the decriminalizing of petty offenses. When we say petty offenses, we are talking about some of the offenses that we have in our books that are not violent offenses, that do not really affect anybody, and some of these offenses actually criminalizes poverty. For example, 2 people riding on Okada, yes, on a motorbike, it's against the law, but it's a crime of poverty. You will not find a rich man's child riding a motorbike. And obviously, if a rich man's child or a rich man is riding such a motorbike and is arrested, he will be able to pay the fine. Unfortunately, it's not so. And in our part of the world, people are doing Okada because it's an economic activity. So obviously, there is a problem there. So it's like we are criminalizing poverty.
So obviously the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative is leading the conversation on the issue of decriminalizing petty offences. But there are other CSOs, such as the Center for Democratic Development, who have also been holding discussions on this. We want to take a listen to Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante sharing his opinion on the matter at a discussion on non-custodial sentencing.
We were tasked to work on trying to just identify people on remand that need to be Basically, we have to review their cases so that we can address the congestion issue. And this is the work that over the years, Jonathan has, and his young people, they are really young people who have, I admire them a lot for their dedication, for what they have done over the years. Their passion is what has saved so many people in prisons. Because those times we used to travel with CHRI, we used to travel with the Judicial Committee in Parliament, going to prisons in across the country, and you would not believe the kind of conditions that people have to live in. And one of the things that was is still in my brain up to today is all the lesions that you see on the skin of people because of the heat. And if you come out of prison, that is a mark that never leaves you. Even if you get rehabilitated, it always reminds you of the encounter, and you are angry with society. Because some of them, is even by accident. So I think that sometimes because you are in somewhere away from people, we forget that they even exist. We should remember that 60% of the population is under 35 in this country. I don't know, the prison service used to publish an annual thing in terms of and give statistics on the ages and so on. But we should then look at in the next 10 years and say that the most of the people who will be going to jail will probably be between 18 and 35. So that is our workforce, our productive workforce that we will be, and they have the energy. And if they keep going in and out, then we should remember that we're going to have a very difficult society to deal with. So I think it's imperative. What we're hoping to do is that from this stakeholder engagement, we can do a letter to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General so that we continue from where Jonathan said we ended, which is 2020, and really expedite action as quickly as possible for the next steps to happen.
Well, a member of the legal unit of the Ghana Prison Service, ASP Stephen Okanya-Boaji, also says congestion in Ghana's prisons is contributing to a surge in hardened criminals.
Because of overcrowding, we are not able to do proper classification of inmates. You see, we are not supposed to put hardened criminals with less hardened criminals in the same cell. You see, but because of lack of space, when they are brought in, we have to do that. So, as a result, those who are less hardened, when they come into contact with the hardened criminals or prisoners, they tend to learn certain bad behaviors and all that. When they go back to the society, they go and reoffend and come back. So that is why we are saying that if we are able to decongest our prisons and there is more space, we'll be able to do proper classification and avoid contamination. Yes.
And does it have any connection with non-custodial sentencing?
Yeah, it has. Because when there is imposition of fines, there is imposition the other options of non-custodial sentencing. It will mean that we will have less prisoners coming. Yes. So if a person is sentenced to community service, if a person is sentenced to, let's say, to do probation, we don't need, that person will not come to prison, and it will reduce the number of prisoners. So it will help us to do our work efficiently.
Okay, so there you have it. The other thing that we want to take out of this issue, even before we link up with Madam Mena Mensah, who is the director of the Africa Office of the Commonwealth Human Rights, who intervened in the cases of those two gentlemen, the story that we shared a bit earlier with Maxwell Agbagba. Before I link up to her, I want you to remind you of Section 124 of the Road Traffic Act 2004, Act 683. It is an offense. If you didn't know, now you know. If you witness an accident, if you are driving or you are a passenger and the vehicle even knocks down an animal, you have a responsibility to report it at the nearest police station. By doing so, who knows, you may be avoiding a fine or possibly a prison term. Now, let me say good morning to Madam Mena Mensah. She's joining us via Zoom. There you are. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Morning, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Great. So Maxwell Agbagba, my colleague, shared the story of the two gentlemen, one who was sitting behind a motorbike who found himself in prison because he couldn't pay a fine, and another one who had transferred his sister's money via mobile money to himself, who was also charged for stealing and fined, and he couldn't pay, and so he was in prison. So thank you for the effort. But how many of such people are there in our prisons?
There's quite a lot. Unfortunately, the Ghana Prison Service cannot really give us the total number, because normally, by the time they give us the number and we go back, some of them would have probably served part of their sentence and have been released. So it's difficult to get an accurate number. We are still engaging them for them to give us the total number. But there are quite a lot, ranging from people who assaulted other persons and they were asked to pay fines, ranging from people who were driving without licenses or their licenses had expired. And most of them are there because they were fined and they could not pay for the fine. So there are quite a lot of such people.
So how do you get to hear these stories leading to the interventions that you make?
And we work in the sector. The Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative is an independent organization, and we ensure the practical realization of human rights. I'm sure you've heard a lot about us in terms of our police reforms work and then the right to information work. But we also do access to justice. We've been doing it since 2008, where we visit police stations in actually two regions, Accra and Ashanti region, and offer legal assistance services or legal education to inmates. And so through that, we started working on decriminalizing of petty offenses. One of our partners, Osiwa, who had been supporting us to do our police station work, supported us to do decriminalizing of petty offenses, because we realized that at the level of the police stations, for instance, a lot of the people who are there are for petty offenses. And in our law, we do not have petty offenses in our law. We have misdemeanors. And the minimum for a misdemeanor is from 0 to 3 years. Yes. Unfortunately, most of our courts tend to go beyond the 1 year, 2 years. And then it creates a problem for the system. So that is how come we got involved in that. It was through our police work that we realized that there are a lot of people in the police stations and even at the prison levels. Sometime in 2010 or 12, we did some work on the socio-economic impact of pre-trial detentions, which we had to visit the prisons to get data, and all these things came up. We realized that quite a number of people are also working in the sector unofficially. For example, churches visit them and offer some sort of help, but nobody was really talking about the entry point, where to start from, because you start from somewhere to get them in there. And that is where we came in, at the level of the police station. And we decided, as part of an advocacy that is going on globally and regionally at the level of the African Commission, to engage in this kind of conversation. In 2015 or 16, the African Commission brought out some guidelines on petty offenses, on decriminalizing petty offenses. So it's based on that we are also doing this advocacy, and it's Africa-wide, actually, even global.
So what it means is that those who couldn't pay the fines, who are in prison, once we go in there and we pay, they can get out.
Exactly. So long as you go, you pay the fine, they are let out. So we would wish that a lot more people would engage in that.
Do you have more people on your list, though, that you're hoping that you can pay for them to be released?
Yes, we do. Currently, we helped about 6 people in Kumasi about a month ago, and we've heard that there's about they are sending us a list of 5 more that they've got in recent times. So they told us that we'll get it by tomorrow, the list tomorrow. And then we know in Ankafo, we went to Ankafo a couple of weeks ago and got some people out. But we understand they've also prepared another list for Ankafo, which we would be engaging with the Ghana Prison Service to get out as soon as we get the list.
Okay. So on this issue of decriminalization, I want to ask where we are with the conversation, if we're really making, as in not custodial sentencing, if we're really making any headway. But you know, the whole idea of going to prison, in this case, it's a punishment for not paying the fine. But there's also a motive, which is to reform. So if somebody stole, for instance, and they haven't been totally reformed because you've paid the money and they've gotten out earlier than they were expected to, are you taking them through some kind of education or some kind of reform so that they can come back even if they are stealing 50 Ghana cedis or 10 Ghana cedis, so that they don't go back to stealing?
Thank you. You know what? It's interesting you are saying that the prisons is meant to reform. You and I would agree. I doubt that you disagree with me if you go to our prisons. There is nothing reformative about what goes in there. Not because the service does not want to, but because they do not have the capacity. If you listen to Stephen, the gentleman who from the Ghana Prison Service, and then I'm happy to say that Stephen is a product of CHRI. Stephen was working with it as years ago when we started the Justice Centers project and visiting the police stations. So he was part of the team that started that project. And he said that there are some people who come in there with minor crimes, and they end up going out as hardened criminals. I do not think you would call that reformation. In terms of what we are doing, unfortunately, it's a capacity issue. We are engaging, there's so much we can do. We are a civil society organization with a staff strength not more than 15, so there's little we can do in terms of reforming. But there are other agencies that are engaging in reformative issues after prison, and we are engaging with them to find out where we can collaborate so that when people like this come out, they can be reformed. In cases of people who, for example, somebody who sat on a motorbike or who did not have a license or a valid license for driving a commercial vehicle, you would agree with me that if this person comes out, it is not likely that he's going to commit an offense that would be violent. But if you keep him in there, he might end up learning another thing altogether. So yes, we agree that prisons are supposed to reform. Unfortunately, our prisons as they are now, it is difficult to really reform anybody in there. And so the best we can do is to ensure that those who committed minor offenses do not end up being hardened criminals and being so bitter that when they come out, then it becomes another issue altogether. So we are working on that. It's a process. So we are still engaging to see what we can do. But in the interim, to avoid them becoming hardened criminals, especially for the petty offenders, we think that it is good if you pay the fine and let them come out.
Great. So finally, let's check out how far with the conversation on non-custodial sentence. I think we've talked a bit. Are there real actions on the ground? Do you see some progress?
I think that a lot of work has been done on it. And for me, I think that, as usual, we are dragging our feet as a country. I think when it comes to the criminal justice sector, there are all kinds of challenges. But you see, it is because sometimes there is the fear of backlash. For example, the question that you asked me about reforming offenders. A lot of people think that the moment somebody has committed an offense, the person is a criminal. And so I think that on the part of the authorities, because you've had conversations around the issue, and one of the issues that they come up with is the fact that addressing system is not good, so it's difficult to keep a track of such people. But we need to start from somewhere. So for me, I think the process has been too slow because the bill was ready, I'm told last year, was submitted, and I must say, like Kujo said, kudos to the Pulse Foundation, Jonathan and his group, and kudos to CDD as well, because when I joined CHRI as far back as in 2006 or 7, and CDD was having conversations around non-custodial sentencing. And that's the beauty of it, civil society coming together for one purpose, where somebody starts, somebody picks up, and then we continue. We could have done this a long time ago. So for me, I think the progress has been extremely slow, and we need, as a country, our leaders need to really quicken up the pace for us to get this law passed and implemented, to help all of us as a people, and to help those who offend. At the end of the day, it is said that the heartbeat of a country can be gauged at the way it treats its offenders. And I think in Ghana, we are not doing very well when it comes to that.
Well, thank you very much, Mina, for your time. Thank you certainly for what you do. And hopefully, I'm not sure, you don't need money, do you?
We need a lot of money, a lot of it. So if you won't even give it to us directly, I think that engage the Ghana Prison Service, find out how you can help those who have been fined, and then find out how you can help with the rehabilitation of offenders when they come out. I think that for me, you don't need to give the money to CHRI, although we need a lot of money to do this work. I would prefer that the money is given to institutions that are helping to rehabilitate those who offend, especially those who commit crimes because they are economic activities and it's life-sustaining activities. I think that would be really useful.
Okay.
And thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you very much. That's Mina Mensah there. And that's our conversation on the issue of non-custodial sentencing. But remember the lesson here. Sometimes you can avoid going to prison for these petty offenses. Just try and respect the law. The message that we're sending across today is stop and report an accident. If it occurs and you witness it, report it. If you're sitting behind the bike or you're sitting in the vehicle as a passenger, you also do have a responsibility to report accidents.